Greetings from the Book Whisper. Every story is a journey into a world of love, passion, deception, and self-discovery. Close your eyes, let the sounds carry you away, and may this story touch your heart. Transparent walls. The rain in Seattle doesn't fall, it hangs in the air, a permanent, gray, and damp veil that seeps under the skin, into the wool of coats, and finally, into the most secret, unguarded corners of the soul. It was on such a day, a Tuesday of no particular significance, that Elijah Reed understood, with a clarity that felt surgical, that his marriage to Isabella was not just ailing, it had died. Its passing was marked not by a bang, not by slammed doors or shattered porcelain, but by a quiet, definitive click. The sound of her shoulder, the delicate bone beneath the cashmere of her sweater, recoiling from his absent-minded touch as if from a live wire. She hadn't even looked up from her book. The recoil was autonomic, final. They lived in a loft in Belltown, a monument to their former shared taste. Panoramic windows framed a postcard view of Elliott Bay and the distant, mist-shrouded Olympic Mountains. The space was an essay in glass, steel, and the cold, precise gleam of chrome. A minimalist sanctuary they had once chosen together, pointing at floor plans, admiring the ruthless simplicity of the lines, believing that such purity of space could foster a purity of feeling. Now, to Elijah, those same lines felt like the bars of a beautifully designed cage, and the transparent walls, the very feature they had most coveted, felt like the cruelest mockery of all. You could see everything: the slow dance of container ships on the slate gray water, the weather rolling in, the other illuminated apartments where other lives, real or imagined, played out. Yet within his own four walls, he could not truly touch a thing. Love, it had existed, it had been a physical presence, hot and all-consuming, when they first collided at the Brioche Art Fair 7 years ago. He, a young architect on the rise, had stood mesmerized before her installation, a chaotic, beautiful cloud of intertwined copper wires and salvaged piano keys, titled Unheard Resonance. She, a radiant artist blazing with ideas, had dissected his portfolio of architectural blueprints later over cheap wine, pointing out the missing heartbeat in his sleek structures. "They're flawless, Elijah," she had said, her finger tracing a line on a facade, "but where does the breath go?" They were opposites that magnetized. He offered her structure, she offered him soul. They built their common world on a fervent passion for beauty and, they were certain, for each other. But passion, he now mused, staring at the rain-beaded window, was like certain types of concrete. It promised permanence, but over time, it shrank, and in shrinking, it inevitably revealed the cracks in the foundation beneath. Disappointment, the silent killer, had crept in on socked feet. His projects grew larger, more prestigious, his business trips to Dubai and Tokyo longer. Her anticipated breakthrough in the fiercely competitive contemporary art world never materialized. The galleries gave polite, deflating rejections. The bitter aftertaste was washed down with a practical job as an art director at a mid-tier advertising agency, where she sold soft drinks and luxury cars with borrowed aesthetics. Their dinner conversations, once spirited debates about form and function, slowly dwindled into logistical updates. They discussed the quarterly HOA fees, the malfunctioning smart home system, and forwarded news articles to their shared group chat with friends, a digital simulacrum of connection. The final, paper-cut thin straw for Elijah had been her comment, a mere 3 words, under his Instagram post showcasing his newly completed Cascade Cultural Center, "Looks cold." He had stared at the notification, a hollow opening up beneath his sternum. He had poured 3 years of his soul, his sleepless nights, his vision into that project. And all she saw was a temperature. The small treacheries began as acts of self-preservation. White lies, harmless in isolation, became the scaffolding of their separate realities. Client dinner ran late, he'd text, sitting alone in his corner office at Modern Forum, the city lights twinkling like fallen stars below, simply because the silence waiting for him at home had become a physical weight. Helping Ava with her gallery prep tonight, she'd message, while actually wandering alone through the damp, nearly deserted alleys of Pike Place Market after midnight, breathing in the pungent smell of fish, whetstone, and diesel, feeling more alive in her solitude than in their shared space. And then, into this carefully balanced ecosystem of quiet despair, entered Emma. Emma Sterling was a force of nature contained within the sleek confines of their architectural firm. A junior partner, a decade younger than Elijah, she was a visionary with digital modeling tools, her ideas reshaping urban proposals with a blend of poetic sensibility and algorithmic precision. She wasn't a classic beauty, but she carried a magnetic, crackling energy that altered the air in a room. She wore impeccably tailored suits with scuffed Converse sneakers, laughed with a loud, contagious freedom that made senior partners frown and smile despite themselves, and she looked at his blueprints not as a set of technical instructions, but as narratives waiting to be unlocked. "Elijah," she said one afternoon, materializing at his desk with 2 coffees. She leaned over his latest sketches for the waterfront competition, her presence both an intrusion and a relief. "This atrium space here, it's genius in its simplicity, but look." Her finger, with a short, unpolished nail, tapped a vast, empty quadrant on the plan. "You're leaving people alone here, with nothing but their own thoughts and the weather. Architecture shouldn't just house people, it should hold them. It should offer a glimpse of hope, a reason to look up. Want me to show you what I mean?" She showed him, not just with a quick sketch over tracing paper. Later that week, under the guise of site inspiration, she showed him the city from the roof of her Capitol Hill apartment building, a messy, lived-in space bursting with plants and large-format art books. She showed him a tiny, hidden bar where a saxophonist played soulful jazz to a crowd of 20. She showed him, most crucially, what it felt like to be truly seen again, not as Elijah Reed, award-winning architect, but as a man, confused, intellectually weary, and starving for a warmth that had nothing to do with radiant floor heating. Their first kiss was an accident born of claustrophobia and shared, nervous laughter. The elevator in a historic downtown building, which they were assessing for renovation, shuddered and died between the 8th and 9th floors, plunging them into startling silence followed by dim emergency lights, not out of some sudden, irresistible passion, but out of a solidarity forged in that absurd, sudden trap. He made a wry joke about faulty pre-war wiring. She laughed, the sound too loud in the small space, and in that laughter, something brittle in him snapped and released. He kissed her. It was not a tender kiss, but one of raw, unvarnished need. For 60 seconds, the world beyond the bronze doors ceased to exist. Elijah immersed himself in the affair like a man sinking into a hot bath after being lost in a freezing wilderness. The guilt was there, a dull, persistent ache in his gut, but it was manageable, like background noise. Lying to Isabella acquired a terrifying ease. Last-minute revisions from the city planning committee, he'd say, the words tasting like ash and liberation. The central, undeniable truth was a feeling he had forgotten. He was breathing again, deep, full breaths. What he did not know, what he was too preoccupied to sense, was that Isabella, in her own parallel universe, was also breathing, a very different, grittier, more potent air. His name was Noah. He existed in the interstitial spaces of the city, a graffiti artist whose whimsical, philosophically loaded murals began appearing on the blank canvases of Seattle, on the sides of condemned buildings, under freeway overpasses, on the security shutters of old shops. Isabella discovered his work first, through a grainy photo on a fringe urban exploration forum. It was a colossal, intricate owl perched on a rain gutter, its feathers meticulously composed from tiny, handwritten quotes from Ray Bradbury. It was on a derelict warehouse wall in Fremont. She felt a jolt, a recognition she hadn't experienced in years. She wrote an effusive, analytically sharp post about it on her anonymous street art blog, Ghost Walls, dissecting its literary references and its poignant commentary on urban decay and forgotten stories. A message appeared in her anonymous inbox 2 days later, from the artist himself. "You're the only one who caught the dandelion wine reference in the left eye. Thank you." It was from my grandfather. They started talking, first about art, technique, influences Banksy, Basquiat, the murals of Valparaiso, then it spilled over. He wrote about growing up in Tacoma, about the smell of rust and salt water, about his belief that art was the last true public service. Noah was Elijah's photographic negative, impulsive where Elijah was measured, living firmly in the volatile present, his uniform a permanent map of paint splatters and frayed denim. He saw in Isabella not a frustrated art director, but a dormant creator, a fellow artist who had traded her voice for a salary. "Your writing," Bella, he texted her one night. He alone called her Bella, a name that felt both foreign and thrillingly apt. That's your art. It's fierce and beautiful, but you're hiding it behind a screen. Words on a wall are powerful, but sometimes, you just need to get up on the damn wall, literally. One rain-slicked Friday night, he invited her to come hang. It meant meeting at a chain-link fence with a cut opening, climbing a precarious fire escape, and then sitting on the tar paper roof of an abandoned paint factory in the industrial district. Below them, he worked on a giant concrete wall, illuminated by a portable construction light. She watched, mesmerized, as a complex galaxy of geometric shapes and human figures emerged from the chaotic bursts of spray paint. The smell, acrid, sweet, metallic, was the smell of absolute, unadulterated freedom. After an hour of silence, he climbed back up, breathing heavily, and without a word, handed her a can of vibrant scarlet. Your turn. Don't think, just make a mark. Her hand shook, the nozzle hissed. The line she drew was crooked, tentative, a vivid red scar on the gray surface. She stared at it, and then a laugh bubbled up from a place deep inside her, a place she thought had fossilized. It was loud, ungraceful, and utterly, wholly genuine. Noah watched her, wiping his hands on his pants, and in his eyes, she didn't see the patronizing approval one gives a novice. She saw a blazing, shared recognition. Their infidelity was a different creature from Elijah's. It was not a quiet, guilty escape into comforting warmth. It was a rebellion, a defiant explosion of color in the meticulously curated grayscale of her life. She met him in his chaotic studio in a converted garage in Ballard, a space drowning in sketches, half-finished canvases, and towers of empty coffee cans. In that beautiful mess, she felt the thin, impermeable layer of domestic ice that had formed over her spirit during the years of marriage crack audibly and begin to fall away in sheets. The plot lines of their separate lives, so carefully maintained, began to invisibly intertwine into a knot of exquisite tension, but the actors, consumed by the vitality of their secrets, remained willfully blind. Elijah, electrically charged by the affair with Emma, brought a revolutionary, human-centric concept for the waterfront redesign to the final internal pitch at modern form. It was an idea born during their late nights, a fusion of his structural rigor and her social empathy, a series of sheltered, light wells and interactive sound sculptures that would make the space feel like an extension of the city's living room, not a cold promenade. William, the firm's silver-haired, perpetually skeptical senior partner, raised an eyebrow, then slowly nodded. This is unexpected, Elijah. A softer touch. I like it. You seem re-energized. Found a new muse? The question was casual, but the old man's eyes were sharp. Just remembered what we're actually building for, Elijah replied, his gaze flickering instinctively to where Emma stood by the coffee machine. She caught his look and gave him a small, private smile over the rim of her cup, a smile that felt like a shared secret and a promise. Meanwhile, propelled by Noah's unshakable faith, Isabella made a leap that had been haunting her dreams for years. She handed in her resignation at the agency, a moment of dizzying terror and elation. Using the cautious savings she'd kept in her own account, a rainy day fund that had metaphorically never stopped pouring, she signed a lease on a raw, narrow space in the heart of Pioneer Square. She named it the Fault Line Gallery. It would not show soothing abstracts or palatable landscapes. Its mandate was art that vibrated with tension, that was brutal, street-born, and politically or emotionally uncomfortable. Her inaugural exhibition, Unsanctioned Voices, was a tribute to Noah and his circle. For the opening night, her heart a frantic bird in her chest, she sent a formal, elegant invitation to Elijah's office. He came, of course, punctual, bearing a bouquet of expensive white calla lilies, the very picture of supportive husband. Crossing the threshold, he was physically stunned. The space was a cacophony of defiance. Bold, large-scale graffiti canvases screamed from the walls, sculptures welded from rusted car parts and shattered mirrors threatened the shins of patrons. A looping video installation showed time-lapse footage of police painting over a vibrant mural, and in the center of it all stood Isabella. Not his Isabella, but a woman with a new posture, dressed in stark black, speaking animatedly with a group of young, intensely focused artists. She was a stranger, a formidable, fascinating stranger. He found his voice, finally. Isabella, this is incredible, he breathed. the sincerity in his voice surprising even him. "I had no idea the scale of this." Her smile was polite, professional. "You never asked," she said, her tone soft but carrying the weight of an epic. For a fleeting second, their eyes held. In that space between them hung something entirely new, not the ghost of love, not the heat of hatred, but a sharp, mutually aching astonishment. "Who are you?" It was then, as his gaze swept the room in a daze, that he saw it. Tacked to a secondary wall, among preliminary sketches, was a detailed, large format drawing. It was a proposed mural designed for a vast, curved seawall, his seawall, the central feature of his waterfront design. The sketch was bold, daring, incorporating kinetic elements of light and shadow, and it fit his architectural concept with a symbiosis that felt almost psychic. In the bottom right corner, a familiar signature slashed across the paper, "Noah." A cold trickle, like the Seattle rain, traced its way down his spine. "This one," he said, forcing his voice into a casual, professional register, pointing. "The artist. Who is he?" Isabella followed his gaze, a subtle, complex emotion flickered in her own. "Oh, that's Noah, a remarkably talented guy. We've been collaborating on some concepts." The pause before collaborating was microscopic, but to Elijah, it echoed in the suddenly hollow gallery. The intricate dance reached its inevitable, crashing crescendo when professional fate decided to draw all the threads together. Modern form, to the subdued celebration of the team, won the multi-million-dollar tender for the Elliott Bay waterfront revitalization project. In the final development meeting, Elijah, now the project lead, passionately argued for integrating a major, site-specific art installation as the project's emotional core. "It can't just be a space," he insisted to the clients and his team. "It needs a heartbeat." He proposed an artist, citing the raw power and civic engagement in their work. He proposed Noah. The irony was so perfect, so devastating, he was entirely blind to it. He saw only the brilliance of the work, the perfect marriage of form and raw emotion. Isabella, now officially acting as curator and Noah's representing agent, attended the final contractual meeting at the Modern Form offices. They sat across from each other in the stark, glass-walled conference room on the 15th floor, he at the head of the polished table, she in the visitor's chair. They discussed budgets with 6 zeros, engineering constraints, weathering coefficients for exterior paints, community approval timelines. They spoke in the sterile, precise language of professionals, of strangers. Emma, as lead designer, sat to Elijah's right. Throughout the 2-hour meeting, Isabella observed the subtle, intimate grammar of their connection, the way Emma would subtly angle a document toward him, the way their knees briefly touched under the table during a moment of shared amusement at a client's ridiculous query. It was a language Isabella remembered, a language she had once been fluent in. She watched the light, confirming touch, and in a single, crystalline moment of clarity, she understood everything. There was no volcanic surge of rage, no sharp sting of betrayal. Instead, a profound, almost peaceful coldness settled over her. She understood his affair, and in that understanding, she instantly understood the true nature of her own. They had both, in their desperation, tried to outsource the repair of their broken selves. They had not found new love, they had found mirrors, reflecting back the lost, vital parts of themselves that had gone dormant within the marriage. Leaving the cool, conditioned air of the skyscraper, she stood on the sidewalk as the ubiquitous drizzle began. She called Noah. "It's done, the contract is signed, it's yours." His voice was a grand she could hear. "That's insane, that's all you, Bella. This calls for a proper celebration. My studio? I've got a bottle of terrible whiskey that's perfect for the occasion." She looked up at the seamless gray expanse of sky, at the anonymous tide of pedestrians flowing around her. "Not tonight, Noah," she said, her voice steady. I need to go home and sort some things out, for good." The climax of their story arrived not with theatrics, but in the profound, waiting silence of their loft. Elijah came home late, the city lights smeared across the wet windows like a weeping impressionist painting. Isabella was waiting for him, not in bed, but sitting on the wide, low windowsill, a silhouette against the glittering panorama. She didn't turn, she didn't ask where he had been, the need for that pretense had evaporated. He poured a glass of water, the sound absurdly loud. Finally, he spoke to her back. Long day with the waterfront lawyers. I know about Emma, she said, her voice calm, flat, a statement of meteorological fact. He froze, the glass halfway to his lips. He didn't bother with denial, the energy it would require was gone. And I know about Noah, he responded, his own voice hoarse. She simply nodded, a slow dip of her head seen in profile against the city glow. For a long time, they existed together in the semi-darkness of the cavernous room, watching each other's reflections in the black glass, two ghosts haunting the same empty palace. Isabella was the one who finally gave words to the specter between them. We both stepped out, we both went looking for something that wasn't there anymore, not in this space, not in each other. She turned her head to look at him directly. We became transparent, Elijah. We could see right through each other, and then we just became invisible. I tried, he said, the words scraping out. I tried to reach you, 1,000 times. So did I, she admitted, and there was a sad wonder in her tone, but we were knocking on the wrong doors. We were knocking on a wall we built ourselves, brick by brick, out of neglected ambition, swallowed resentment, and God, so much silence. He walked over, stopping a few feet from her, their reflections now side by side in the window, ghostly and insubstantial. So what now? What do we do with this wreckage? The waterfront project, she said, and her voice gained a new quality, a still wire of resolve. We see it through, you, as the architect, me, as the curator, Noah, as the artist. We make it the best damn thing this city has seen. It will be our final collaboration, our most honest piece of work. And after the last ribbon is cut, after the last review is written, then we dissolve this, she said, gesturing around the loft. We get a divorce, a clean one, no more over the Eames chair or the Le Creuset pots. This glass cage you can have it, or sell it, I don't want it. You can be with Emma, if that's what you want. She paused, looking out at the endless, rain-veiled lights. I am going to stay with myself for a while, I need to relearn who that is. He had braced for the storm, for tears, for screamed accusations, for the cathartic smash of something expensive against the concrete floor. Instead, he felt a wave of something entirely unexpected, a strange, bitter, profound relief. The truth, once spoken, once aired in the open between them, was not a monster, it was a key, an ugly, heavy, complicated key, but it fit the lock of the beautiful cage they had inhabited for years. The formal end came on a cool, bright afternoon a year later, a day that felt borrowed from a different climate. The Elliott Wave waterfront was officially open to the public. It was an instant sensation, praised for its humane design and powerful artistic integration. Elijah's austere, sweeping curves of pale concrete and reclaimed wood were pierced and animated by slender towers of shifting colored light, an idea conceived by Emma during a late-night conversation. This architecture served as the perfect, serene stage for Noah's monumental, emotionally charged mural, which covered the primary sea wall. It was titled Two Depths. From one vantage point, it was a hyper-realistic reflection of the ever-changing Seattle sky clouds, swooping gulls, the blush of sunset. But if a viewer walked 50 feet to the left, the perspective shifted magically. The reflection transformed, revealing the interior depth of a room, a familiar, minimalist room where two faint, shadowy human figures stood back to back, disconnected. Yet, in the complex play of painted light on the glass of the mural's window, their outstretched hands appeared to almost touch, a phantom connection existing only in the realm of reflection and memory. The opening gala was a crush of politicians, civic leaders, art critics, and the simply curious. Elijah stood with Emma near the light sculpture, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, a public claim staked. Isabella stood alone, a graceful figure in a simple, elegant black dress, moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations with a calm, professional grace. Their eyes met across the sea of people, a final, silent transmission. He saw in her gaze not the old pain, but a quiet, formidable completion. She saw in his a deep, weary gratitude, and a final farewell. As the crowds began to disperse, drawn by champagne and canapes, they found themselves, almost by accident, alone for a moment by the massive mural. The sounds of the celebration were a distant murmur. You were right, you know, Isabella said, not looking at him, but tracing the lines of the painted window with her eyes. What you said architecture should do, offer hope. This she gestured to the entire space. Does that? He shook his head slowly. It's not my architecture, not really, and it's not Noah's mural, it's the place where all of it intersected. It's the fossil of our crack, and somehow something grew through it. He extended his hand to her. It was not an offer of reconciliation, not a plea, it was a formal ritual, a gesture of closure between business partners at the end of a monumental, difficult, and ultimately successful venture. She looked at his hand for a second, then took it. Her grip was firm, dry, and final. Goodbye, Elijah. Goodbye, Isabella. He turned and walked toward the parking lot, where Emma was waiting, talking animatedly with a reporter. Isabella remained. She took one step closer to the mural and lifted her hand, not to the painted reflection, but to the actual, withered, sun-warmed concrete of the seawall beneath it. Her fingertips brushed the rough, gritty surface, the solid, unyielding reality that now, and for decades to come, would hold the immutable, layered story of their love, their betrayal, and their hard-won, separate liberations. The rain, true to its nature, began to gather again in the air, a fine, cool mist, but for the first time in years, it did not feel to either of them like a prison, nor a metaphor for their stasis. It was simply weather, the weather of this place, cold, damp, but ultimately, clean. It was washing away the last, clinging dust of the past, leaving behind only the clear, sharp, and uncharted lines of the present, a future each now owned entirely alone. They would build again, both of them, but no longer on the fault lines of a shared fantasy, no longer within the silent, transparent walls of a glass cage. They would build, at last, on the solid, unforgiving, and necessary foundation of truth. And just like that, another journey on the Book Whisper comes to an end. We hope it was worth your while. If this story found a place in your thoughts, help us keep the magic alive. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next world we explore. Your like is the best signal telling us which tales to tell more of. Thank you for listening. Until the next adventure.